Jamie Park looked like he'd never thrown a punch in his life. 22 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, maybe 140 pounds dripping wet. Wireframe glasses. A college dropout from the suburbs doing 3 years for cybercrime. The kind of kid who'd spent more time behind a keyboard than in a gym. When he walked into Southridge Penitentiary's D block, the predators started circling immediately. Trey Breaker Williams ran the Southside crew, the most violent gang in the facility. 15 members, all serving life sentences, all with nothing to lose. Breaker himself was a 6'4" former enforcer with 17 assault charges and a reputation for breaking new inmates on their first week. He found Jamie in the rec yard on day 2, sitting alone on a bench, reading a book. "Hey, college boy," Breaker called out, his crew forming a semicircle behind him. "You know the rules here? Fresh meat pays a tax." Jamie looked up from his book slowly, marking his page. His expression was calm, almost bored. "I don't have anything to give you," he said quietly. Breaker's grin widened. "Then I guess we take it from you the hard way." He reached down to grab Jamie's collar. What happened next took exactly 2 seconds. Jamie stood up, not rushed, not panicked, and Breaker's hand never made contact. "Stay with me until the end. Because what this computer nerd does to 15 gang members in under 30 seconds will force the entire prison to rewrite the power structure overnight." Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Nobody at Southridge Penitentiary knew about the 13 years Jamie had spent training at Master Chen's Academy in Chinatown. Nobody knew about the countless hours he'd devoted to Wing Chun, Jeet Kune Do, and traditional Shaolin techniques. They saw the glasses, the soft voice, the computer science textbooks in his cell, and they made their assumptions. Those assumptions were about to cost them dearly. The moment Breaker reached for his collar, Jamie shifted his weight slightly to the left. His right hand came up in a gentle arc, redirecting Breaker's massive arm away from his body. The motion was so fluid, so natural, that most observers thought Breaker had simply missed his target. But Breaker felt it. The subtle pressure. The way his momentum got turned against him. For a split second, confusion flickered across his face. "What the?" Breaker started to say, but Jamie was already moving. The young man stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His left hand touched Breaker's wrist, barely a tap, while his right palm pressed against the gang leader's solar plexus. Not a strike, just pressure. Gentle, controlled pressure. Breaker stumbled backward 3 steps, gasping. His crew members looked at each other uncertainly. Their leader, the man who'd hospitalized 12 inmates in the past year, had just been pushed back by someone who looked like he belonged in a library. "Saw you little piece of—" Breaker roared, charging forward with both fists raised. Jamie remained perfectly still until the last possible moment. Then he stepped aside, just one small step, and Breaker's charging bulk sailed past him, crashing into the concrete wall behind the bench. The rec yard fell silent. Even the guards in the towers turned to watch what was happening below. Breaker pushed himself off the wall, blood trickling from a split lip. His eyes burned with humiliation and rage. This wasn't how things worked in his world. The small got crushed. The weak got broken. The educated got taught lessons about real life. "Tommy, Rico, grab him!" Breaker commanded. 2 of his lieutenants moved in from opposite sides. Tommy, the Tank Martinez, weighed 280 pounds and had earned his nickname by running through defensive lines during his brief college football career. Rico Santos had killed 3 men with his bare hands before his 21st birthday. They approached Jamie like wolves cornering prey, confident in their numbers and experience. Jamie closed his eyes for just a moment, centering himself. When he opened them again, something had changed. The nervous college kid was gone. In his place stood someone who moved with the fluid grace of water, the rooted stability of mountains. Tommy reached him first, throwing a haymaker that could have decapitated a smaller man. Jamie ducked under it effortlessly, his body flowing like liquid. As Tommy's fist whistled over his head, Jamie's palm struck backward into Tommy's exposed armpit. The big man's arm went numb instantly, and he stumbled sideways, clutching his shoulder. Rico came in low, trying to tackle Jamie around the waist, but Jamie had already pivoted, using Rico's own momentum to guide him past. A gentle push between the shoulder blades sent Rico sprawling face first onto the concrete. Both attackers were down in under 5 seconds. The remaining crew members exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't possible. Computer nerds didn't move like that. Skinny kids from the suburbs didn't neutralize seasoned killers with what looked like dancing. But Breaker's pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of his crew. Not in front of the entire yard, which was now watching with fascination and growing respect for the newcomer. "All of you," Breaker snarled. "Take him down! Now!" 13 men advanced on Jamie simultaneously. Murderers, drug dealers, armed robbers, men who'd built their reputations on violence and intimidation. They formed a loose circle around the young man, cutting off any escape routes. Jamie stood in the center of their formation, breathing slowly and evenly. His hands hung relaxed at his sides. To the untrained eye, he looked helpless, surrounded, finished. But Jamie wasn't seeing 13 individual threats. He was seeing patterns, flow, energy that could be redirected, momentum that could be borrowed and returned with interest. The first attacker came from his left, a wiry man named Spider, who'd earned his nickname by being impossible to pin down in a fight. Jamie stepped into Spider's charge rather than away from it, his shoulder connecting with Spider's chest. The impact wasn't hard, but it was perfectly timed. Spider's feet left the ground, and he sailed backward into 2 of his approaching teammates. A fist flew toward Jamie's head from the right. He tilted his head slightly, letting the punch graze past his ear, then captured the extended arm with both hands. A quick twist, a step to the side, and the attacker found himself airborne, landing hard on his back 10 feet away. Someone grabbed Jamie from behind, wrapping thick arms around his chest in a bear hug. Instead of struggling against the hold, Jamie relaxed completely, dropping his center of gravity. His elbow found the attacker's ribs. Not a violent strike, just precise pressure on a nerve cluster. The arms around him went slack immediately. The attacks kept coming, but Jamie flowed between them like smoke. Every movement was economical, purposeful. He used their size against them, their aggression against them, their expectations against them. When they expected him to retreat, he advanced. When they expected resistance, he yielded. When they expected weakness, he demonstrated perfect control. One by one, Breaker's crew found themselves on the concrete. Not beaten into submission, Jamie hadn't thrown a single punch. They'd been redirected, unbalanced, neutralized. Some couldn't understand how they'd ended up on the ground. Others were nursing sore pressure points that would ache for days. In less than 30 seconds, 13 of the most dangerous men in Southridge Penitentiary lay sprawled around a young man who hadn't even broken a sweat. The rec yard was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. Breaker stood alone now, facing Jamie across 10 feet of empty concrete. His crew was down. His reputation was in ruins. Every inmate in the yard was watching to see what he would do next. For the first time in his adult life, Trey Breaker Williams felt genuine fear. Breaker Williams felt genuine fear. Jamie took 3 measured steps toward Breaker, each footfall deliberate and controlled. The gang leader instinctively moved backward, his hands raising into a defensive position he'd never needed before. Around them, inmates pressed against the fence, watching this impossible confrontation unfold. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Breaker growled, trying to salvage what remained of his authority. His voice carried less conviction than usual. The confident swagger that had intimidated hundreds of prisoners over the years was cracking. Jamie stopped walking. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, studying Breaker with the same calm attention he'd given his book minutes earlier. When he finally spoke, his voice remained soft, but carried a weight that silenced every whisper in the yard. You're right. You don't understand what you're dealing with." The words hit Breaker like a physical blow. This wasn't how conversations worked in his world. Victims begged, they pleaded, they offered deals. They didn't speak with quiet certainty that made seasoned killers question themselves. Breaker lunged forward, desperation replacing strategy. His right fist aimed for Jamie's jaw with enough force to shatter bone. But Jamie had already begun moving before the punch was thrown, reading Breaker's intentions in the subtle shift of his shoulders, the telegraph of his stance. The young man stepped inside Breaker's reach, so close they were almost embracing. Breaker's punch sailed harmlessly over Jamie's shoulder, while Jamie's hand found the pressure point just below Breaker's collarbone. The touch was gentle, almost tender, but Breaker's entire right arm went dead instantly. Panic flashed across the gang leader's face. He swung his left fist in a wild arc, but Jamie was no longer there. The young man had flowed around to Breaker's blind side like water around a stone. Another gentle touch, this time to a nerve cluster near Breaker's spine, and the big man's legs buckled. Breaker crashed to his knees on the concrete, his body refusing to obey his commands. He tried to stand, tried to fight, tried to scream orders at his crew, but his voice came out as a strangled whisper. The paralysis would only last minutes, but in those minutes, his world was ending. Jamie knelt beside him, speaking so quietly that only Breaker could hear. "Master Chen taught me that true strength isn't about breaking others. It's about knowing you could break them and choosing not to. Today, I'm choosing not to." He stood and looked around the rec yard. Every eye was fixed on him. Guards were rushing down from their towers, but they moved slowly, uncertain of what they were responding to. No blood had been spilled, no bones had been broken, yet everyone understood that something fundamental had shifted. The South Side crew members were picking themselves up from the concrete, their movements careful and respectful. They avoided eye contact with Jamie, the way predators avoid looking directly at an apex predator. The hierarchy that had ruled D-Block for 3 years had just been rewritten in 30 seconds. Jamie picked up his book from the bench and walked toward the cell blocks. The sea of inmates parted before him without a word. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply stared in awe. Word would spread through every block, every tier, every corner of Southridge Penitentiary before sunset. The computer nerd from the suburbs wasn't what anyone had expected, but the story was far from over. As Jamie disappeared into the shadows of the cell block, other powers within the prison were already taking notice. The Aryan Brotherhood controlled the North Wing. The Latin Kings owned the kitchen and laundry. The Russian mob ran the contraband trade. Each faction had maintained their territory through careful balance and mutual respect for each other's strength. That balance had just been shattered. In cell block C, Victor the Hammer Petrov was receiving reports from his network of informants. The Russian had built his reputation on chess-like strategic thinking and ruthless elimination of threats. He'd been watching the young Asian inmate since his arrival, noting the subtle signs that others had missed. The way Jamie moved, the way he carried himself, the complete absence of fear in his eyes. Victor crushed the cigarette between his fingers as his lieutenant finished describing the rec yard incident. "This changes everything," he murmured in accented English. "The boy is not what he appears to be." 3 blocks away, Maria Santos received her own briefing. Known throughout the prison as the Ice Queen, she'd clawed her way to leadership of the female inmates through a combination of intelligence, brutality, and an uncanny ability to predict her enemies' moves. She'd been planning to recruit or eliminate Jamie within his first week. Now those plans required serious recalculation. "Get me everything on this kid," she ordered her second-in-command. "Real background, not the surface information. Someone doesn't develop those skills in suburbia. Even Warden Thompson was taking notice from his administrative office. 23 years of running maximum security facilities had taught him to recognize the subtle signs that preceded major upheavals. Inmates didn't just accidentally neutralize entire gangs. There was always more to the story. He pulled Jamie's file from his desk drawer and studied it again. Cybercrime conviction. No priors. Clean record. College dropout. Everything suggested a soft target who would either seek protection or become someone's victim within days. But Warden Thompson had learned not to trust surface appearances. Some of the most dangerous inmates he'd ever encountered had walked through his doors looking like accountants or teachers. The quiet ones were often the ones who surprised everyone. As evening fell across Southridge Penitentiary, Jamie sat on his narrow bunk, reading the same book he'd been studying in the rec yard. His cellmate, a small-time drug dealer named Marcus, watched him nervously from the opposite bed. "Man, what you did out there?" Marcus whispered, glancing toward the cell door. "That was impossible. How'd you learn to fight like that?" Jamie looked up from his book, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, Marcus thought he might actually get an answer. Then Jamie returned his attention to the pages without saying a word. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and possibilities. Outside their cell, the normal sounds of prison life continued. Shouted conversations between tiers, the clash of metal doors, the shuffle of feet on concrete. But underneath it all, a new tension was building. Word had spread through every block, every gang, every faction. The computer nerd from suburbia had done something impossible in the rec yard. Breaker's crew was still trying to process what had happened to them. The guards were filing reports they couldn't quite explain. And throughout the facility, dangerous men were reassessing everything they thought they knew about power, strength, and survival. Jamie turned another page in his book, completely absorbed in whatever he was reading. To Marcus, he looked like any other college kid trying to pass time in an unfortunate situation. But the entire prison was beginning to understand that looks could be deceiving. Very deceiving indeed. The next morning brought an unusual quiet to Southridge Penitentiary. Conversations died as Jamie walked past. Even the guards seemed uncertain how to treat him. Word had spread through every tier, every cell, every corner of the facility. The kid who looked like a college librarian had just dismantled the most feared gang in D-Block without breaking a sweat. But Jamie's display of skill had attracted attention from forces far more dangerous than Breaker's street thugs. Victor the Hammer Petrov sat in his private cell, studying a chessboard while his lieutenant briefed him on the previous day's events. The Russian had survived 12 years in maximum security by treating prison politics like a complex game where every move required 3 steps of foresight. "This boy troubles me," Victor murmured, moving a black knight across the board. His English carried the precision of someone who'd learned the language through necessity rather than education. Men do not develop such abilities by accident. There is history here we do not see. His lieutenant, a scarred man named Dmitri, shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we eliminate the problem before it grows." Victor's pale eyes fixed on him with arctic coldness. "You think like amateur. We do not know extent of his capabilities. Better to test first, understand second, act third." 3 floors below, Maria Ice Queen Santos was conducting her own analysis. Her network of informants had painted a picture that made no sense. A cybercrime conviction. No martial arts background on record. No gang affiliations. No prison connections. Yet somehow this suburban computer nerd had neutralized 15 seasoned killers using techniques that belonged in ancient monasteries, not American prisons. "There's something we're missing," she told her second-in-command, Rosa. "Nobody learns to fight like that from YouTube videos." Rosa nodded nervously. She'd witnessed the rec yard incident from the women's exercise area, watching through the chain-link fence as Jamie flowed between attackers like smoke through fingers. "What do we do about it?" Maria's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We find out who he really is. and then we decide if he's useful or dangerous. Meanwhile, in the administrative wing, Warden Thompson was having his own concerns. He'd pulled every string available to dig deeper into Jamie Park's background, but the information remained frustratingly surface level. Clean criminal record until the cybercrime conviction. No military service, no documented martial arts training. Yet 3 of his guards had witnessed something in that rec yard that defied explanation. The intercom on his desk crackled to life. "Warden, you have a call on line 2. Says it's urgent regarding inmate Park." Thompson frowned and picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was elderly, carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "Warden Thompson? My name is Chen Wei. I believe you have one of my former students in your facility." The conversation that followed would change everything Thompson thought he knew about the quiet young man in cell block D. Jamie himself remained oblivious to the storm gathering around him. He spent his time reading, studying, and maintaining the meditation practices that Master Chen had drilled into him during those 13 years of training. To his cellmate Marcus, he appeared completely unaware that every major power in the prison was now focused on him. But Jamie was far from unaware. He felt the weight of watching eyes everywhere he went, the careful distance other inmates maintained, the whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. He'd grown up in Master Chen's academy, understanding that true strength often attracted the wrong kind of attention. During lunch, he noticed the subtle changes in the cafeteria dynamics. Breaker's crew sat at their usual table, but their posture was different, defeated. Several other groups had shifted their seating arrangements, creating clear sight lines to Jamie's location. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. "You know they're all talking about you, right?" Marcus whispered as they carried their trays to an empty table. Jamie nodded quietly. "I know. What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing, if possible." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "Nothing? Man, you just painted a target on your back the size of Texas. Every gang leader in this place is going to want to test you now." Jamie set down his fork and looked at his cellmate with gentle patience. "Marcus, have you ever seen a river fight a mountain?" "What?" "Water doesn't fight stone. It flows around it, over it, through it. Eventually, the mountain becomes the shape the water chooses." Marcus shook his head in confusion. "I don't understand half the stuff you say, man." Before Jamie could respond, a shadow fell across their table. They looked up to see 3 men standing behind them. Not Breaker's crew. These were different. Cleaner. More disciplined. The leader was a compact man with intelligent eyes and numerous scars across his knuckles. "You are Jamie Park," the man said. It wasn't a question. Jamie met his gaze calmly. "I am. My name is Alexei. I work for someone who would like to speak with you." "About what?" "About opportunities. About protection. About the reality of your situation." Jamie considered this for a moment. Around the cafeteria, conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching this interaction, understanding its significance. Whatever happened next would determine the new balance of power in Southridge Penitentiary. "And if I decline this conversation?" Alexei's smile was thin and professional. "Then you decline. But the invitation will not be extended twice." The threat hung in the air between them, subtle but unmistakable. Jamie could feel the tension radiating from Marcus beside him. His cellmate was terrified, understanding that they were balanced on the edge of something that could go very wrong very quickly. Jamie stood slowly, his movements as controlled as they'd been in the rec yard. "Where?" "Follow me." As they walked through the cafeteria, Jamie felt hundreds of eyes tracking their movement. This wasn't just a conversation. This was theater. A public demonstration that the old rules no longer applied and new alliances were being formed. They passed through several security checkpoints, Alexei somehow producing the necessary permissions for their movement through restricted areas. Jamie began to understand that Viktor Petrov's influence extended far beyond what most inmates realized. The Russian cell was unlike any other Jamie had seen in the facility. Larger, better appointed, books lined makeshift shelves along one wall, A proper chess set sat on a small table. This wasn't a cell. This was an office. Victor himself was not what Jamie had expected. Smaller than his reputation suggested. Maybe 50 years old, with prematurely gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He sat behind his chessboard, studying a game in progress. "Ah, Mr. Park, please sit." Jamie took the offered chair across from the chessboard. Victor continued studying his pieces for several moments, creating a silence that most people would find uncomfortable. Jamie simply waited. "You know," Victor finally said, "in Russia we have saying, the wolf that survives winter is not the strongest wolf, is the smartest wolf." He looked up from the board. "You understand this?" "I do." "Good. Then you understand why we are talking." Victor moved a bishop diagonally across the board. "Yesterday, you demonstrated capabilities that interest me. Today, I offer you choice." "What kind of choice?" "Simple choice. Work with me, and I ensure your time here is comfortable, profitable even. Decline, and you navigate this place alone." Jamie studied the chessboard between them. The position looked complex, but he could see that white was in serious trouble. Black controlled the center. White's king was exposed. Defeat was only a few moves away. "What would working with you involve?" Victor's smile revealed gold teeth. "Sometimes, problems arise that require delicate solutions. You have skills that could prove useful. You want me to hurt people. I want you to solve problems. How you solve them is your choice." Jamie leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Around them, the cell felt heavy with possibility and danger. This conversation would determine not just his immediate future, but potentially his survival in Southridge Penitentiary. "And if I refuse," Victor shrugged, "then you refuse. But understand this, Mr. Park. Yesterday you announced to entire facility that you are not what you appear to be. This creates interest. Some of this interest will be friendly, some will not." The threat was clear without being explicit. Jamie had upset the balance of power in the prison. Now he had to choose sides or face the consequences of standing alone against forces he hadn't fully calculated. "I need time to think about it." "Of course. But not too much time. In a place like this, hesitation can be dangerous." As Jamie was escorted back to his cell block, he felt the weight of his situation settling around him like chains. His display of skill in the rec yard had been necessary to establish boundaries, but it had also painted him as a valuable asset to be acquired or a threat to be eliminated. The game was just beginning. That evening, Jamie sat in his cell, acutely aware that his demonstration in the rec yard had set forces in motion he couldn't control. The conversation with Victor had confirmed what he'd suspected since arriving at Southridge. His skills made him valuable, and valuable assets in prison became targets if they didn't choose protection. Marcus paced nervously across their small cell, occasionally glancing at Jamie with a mixture of awe and terror. Word had spread that the Russian had personally summoned the new inmate. In a place where such meetings usually ended with someone disappearing or joining an organization permanently, Marcus was calculating his own survival odds. "Man, you can't trust Petrov," Marcus whispered, checking the corridor outside their cell. "That dude's got people everywhere. Guards, kitchen staff, even some of the administrators. He's been running schemes in this place for over a decade." Jamie continued reading his book, but his attention was split between the pages and the sounds echoing through the cell block. Conversations carried differently tonight. Hushed tones, quick exchanges, the kind of communication that preceded major shifts in prison politics. "What kind of schemes?" Jamie asked quietly. Marcus sat on his bunk, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Everything, man. Drugs, weapons, information. He's got connections on the outside that most people can't touch. Rumor is he was some kind of intelligence officer back in Russia before he got caught running money through American banks." This information painted Victor's offer in a different light. Jamie had assumed the Russian was simply another gang leader seeking muscle for territorial disputes. But intelligence work required subtlety, patience, and strategic thinking. the kind of skills that might actually align with Jamie's own capabilities. A metallic clang echoed through the tier as the evening lockdown began. Cell doors sealed with automated precision, trapping each inmate in their concrete boxes until morning. But Jamie knew that walls and locks meant little to someone with Victor's resources. Real conversations in prison happened after official hours ended. Around midnight, Jamie heard the soft scrape of metal against metal. Someone was working on the lock mechanism of their cell door. Marcus was snoring softly on his bunk, oblivious to the careful manipulation happening just feet away. The door swung open silently. A shadow filled the doorway. Not Victor's man, Alexei. Someone Jamie hadn't seen before. Tall, lean, moving with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to violence. "Park," the figure whispered. "Time to go." Jamie slipped from his bunk without waking Marcus. He followed the stranger through darkened corridors, past sleeping guards and disabled security cameras. The level of access required for this kind of movement suggested connections that extended far beyond typical gang influence. They descended 2 levels through maintenance areas Jamie didn't know existed. The stranger led him through a series of service tunnels that connected different sections of the prison. Finally, they emerged into a storage room filled with industrial cleaning supplies. Maria Santos stood waiting in the shadows. The Ice Queen was smaller than her reputation suggested, maybe 5 feet 4 inches, but her presence filled the room like a coiled spring. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that made men twice her size step carefully around her. "Mr. Park," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent. "We need to talk." Jamie remained near the doorway, ready to move if necessary. "About what?" "About the fact that Viktor Petrov thinks he can recruit you without considering other interested parties." She stepped into the dim light cast by a single overhead bulb. Jamie could see scars along her forearms, old knife wounds. This woman had fought her way to power through more than just intelligence and connections. "You demonstrated remarkable abilities yesterday," Maria continued. "Skills that could prove valuable to the right organization. But Victor's offer comes with strings that might not align with your long-term survival." "And your offer doesn't?" Her smile was sharp. "My offer involves mutual respect rather than ownership. Victor collects assets. I prefer partnerships." Jamie studied her carefully. Every instinct Master Chen had taught him about reading people suggested that Maria Santos was more dangerous than Victor, precisely because she was more honest about what she wanted. "What kind of partnership?" "The kind where your skills complement my resources, and we both benefit from the arrangement. Victor wants to use your abilities for his schemes. I want to help you develop them." This was unexpected. "Develop them how?" Maria walked to a metal cabinet and retrieved a small wooden box. She opened it carefully, revealing what looked like ancient Chinese coins and small jade figurines. "These belonged to my grandmother," she said quietly. "She spent 30 years studying traditional martial arts in Hong Kong before immigrating to America. She taught me that true mastery requires more than just physical technique." Jamie stepped closer, recognizing some of the symbols carved into the jade pieces. They were meditation aids, tools used in advanced training that went far beyond basic combat applications. "Your grandmother was a practitioner? She was a master, and she taught me to recognize others who follow the same path." Maria's eyes met his. "Yeah, you've had excellent instruction, but your training is incomplete." The observation hit Jamie like a physical blow. Master Chen had been preparing him for advanced techniques when his arrest interrupted everything. 3 years in prison meant 3 years without proper guidance. 3 years of skills slowly deteriorating without the refinement that came from continued study. "What are you proposing?" "Complete your education. My grandmother's teachings, combined with your existing foundation, would create something remarkable." Jamie felt torn between suspicion and genuine interest. The opportunity to continue his martial arts development under proper guidance was tempting beyond measure. But accepting meant choosing sides in a conflict he didn't fully understand. "And in exchange?" in exchange for occasional services that require discretion rather than destruction, Maria finished. Your methods yesterday were impressive precisely because you controlled the situation without causing permanent damage. That kind of precision has value here. Jamie considered her words carefully. Both offers represented survival, but in fundamentally different ways. Victor wanted to weaponize his abilities for schemes that would likely escalate prison tensions. Maria offered development in exchange for calculated interventions that might actually reduce violence. I need 48 hours to decide, Jamie said finally. Maria nodded. Reasonable, but understand that word of this conversation will reach Victor within hours. He doesn't respond well to competition for assets he considers claimed. The journey back to his cell took a different route through areas Jamie was beginning to realize formed a hidden geography within Southridge. Tunnels, blind spots, forgotten spaces that allowed certain inmates to move freely, despite the facility's supposed security measures. Marcus was still sleeping when Jamie slipped back into their cell, but as he settled onto his bunk, Jamie noticed his cellmate's breathing pattern change. Marcus had been awake, listening, calculating his own position in whatever was developing around them. The next morning brought subtle changes throughout the facility. Guards moved with increased alertness. Certain inmates avoided eye contact, while others watched Jamie with open curiosity. The chess game that had begun with his demonstration in the rec yard was accelerating toward moves that would determine not just his fate, but the balance of power throughout Southridge Penitentiary. During breakfast, Jamie noticed Breaker's crew sitting separately from their former leader. The gang structure that had dominated D-Block for 3 years was fragmenting. Some members had approached other organizations. Others were maintaining careful neutrality. Breaker himself sat alone, his authority completely shattered by 30 seconds of effortless defeat. As Jamie carried his tray across the cafeteria, he felt the weight of dozens of calculations happening around him. Every faction was reassessing their position based on his capabilities and the competing offers from Victor and Maria. His choice would ripple through every alliance, every territory, every scheme operating within these walls. The computer nerd from suburbia had become the most important piece on a board he was still learning to understand. And in 48 hours, he would have to decide which game he wanted to play.